25 is a day to remember, let me tell you.
Is it the moon?
Yeah, it was a full moon. I decided that was part of it. But anyway, when I called and told Margaret that Joe was going to be in Salt Lake, she said she wanted to go. I told you that, didn't I? And so I asked her if she was, well, I thought, well, I'll think about this because I don't want to drive up because my car isn't working right. And so she says, well, you're welcome to go with me if you don't, so I thought, well, I've heard that she's different, but if she's nice enough to let me go, why, fine. And in the meantime, I asked my other friends that I went to San Diego with if I could go with them. If they were going, and they says, well, if we do, you're welcome to go with us. And so I said, okay. So then they called and said they weren't going. So, okay, I decided I won't call Margaret and tell her I've changed my mind or anything. We'll just let it go as is. And she had told me, well, let me know the appointment times. And so I called her and told her. So we were to be there Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, Thursday morning at 9, and Thursday afternoon at 2, and Friday morning at 9. And then we were to come home. And I says, well, do you have a place to stay in Salt Lake? And she says, well, my aunt doesn't really want us to stay there because Mike makes her kind of sick to look at him because he's retarded looking or whatever. So I says, okay. She says, well, I've got 2 different friends that we can stay with. And I says, well, I can find a place. So we had it all cut and dried. And she says, I'll come and pick you up between 8 and 8:30 in the morning on Wednesday morning. Okay, so it's all cut and dried. And I waited, and I waited. And I tried to call, and the phone wouldn't ring. And I finally, after, 20 minutes to 10, she came driving up. I was about ready to unpack my suitcase and go out and work in the yard. And here she came, and I says, I just about, to give up on you. And she says, I had a hard time finding your place. And I thought, well, you got to be kidding. Does it take that long? And she says, I went up to 400 South and 500. Now I remember you live on 600 South. And so she says, we better get on our way. And she says, I got to make one more stop. There might be one more passenger going. And then she told me that she had to take some of her kids. Well, I didn't know she's taken all 3 little teeny kids. And I couldn't believe these friends of hers that would take in that many people, So, okay. I says, well, Margaret, do you want to make the phone call to the person that's supposed to be going? Because we're in her little Toyota. And she had me and Mike and her in the front seat, and then the 3 little kids in the back seat with this big old Tupperware bowl full of popcorn and grapes all mixed together. And I says, when to put my suitcase in? And I says, well, Margaret, where's your suitcase? And she says, oh, I just put some clothes in a grocery bag. And that's all there was. Well, that was a clue, but I didn't catch on quite. And then she said, I said, Margaret, why don't you make a phone call in here before we go to this other person's place? If you're not sure they're going, to save time. And she says, no, we'll just stop on our way. Well, she didn't tell me who it was or nothing, and we get going out of town. And finally I says, well, where's this person live? Oh, down by the Pine View High School, down this way. And it was Lynn Clark's son that had been crippled in an accident. She wanted to take him up to the healer. And I thought, where are you going to put him? She says, well, he's in a wheelchair, and if he goes, we could just put him in the back with a wheelchair and that night with these 3 little kids. And it looked, well, anyway. So we got down there, and she goes over and knocks on the door, and there was another clue. Right in front of the door was a note saying, I won't be here, I'm sorry, left a note for her. And she didn't even see it. And she turns and she goes around looking, and I says, there's a note on the door, Margaret. And she goes back and picks it up, and there it's telling her, Mrs. Decker, whatever. And so he says, I'd like to go, but I couldn't make it, so keep me in touch. Still interested. So I thought, well, that's a relief, So, okay, we get in the car and we start out, and you know me, I'm yakking a mile a minute, and we just had a good chat, and every once in a while, Mike would chuckle, because he couldn't talk. but he would kind of laugh, and we had a good time. And the kids I kept looking back, and the older boy kept pounding on those little two other kids, and I thought, my word, and they must be used to this. But she never did look back to see if they were doing okay or say how are they doing. And finally I could see the little boy, he kept pushing the window kind of out on the thing, and I thought, well, he must be trying to tell us, because he looked like he was hollering. And I said, Margaret, I think the kids have got something wrong that they want you to stop. Maybe she says, oh, I think they'll be okay. And I says, well, they might need to go to the bathroom. And so she pulls off the side, and she didn't get out and go back and see. And so I started to open my door to get out, and I says, did you kids want something? And she says, oh, they're okay. And so I shut my door, and we started off again. And we got going up the road, and she's telling me about when she's a child and the trials of living with Carol and how hard she was on you kids. And I heard part of it from you, and I felt kind of bad. I really felt kind of bad for her. And well, to begin with, too, before we left here, she says, it seems like Satan's wanting to put a stop to us going or something. And I says, now, don't give that energy. I says, you don't have to put Satan hasn't, we don't get into that. If we're to go, we're to go. If we aren't, we don't. But don't dwell on this Satan stuff, because that isn't my thing. So anyway, we get going up the road, and I'm trying to teach her a few things, and she was teaching me things about things she'd learned in psychology and this stuff that they'd been teaching her about positive thinking, and and I'm into that. So we're going along, and then she's telling me about her life, and I was feeling really bad for her, and then told me about her kid about drowning in the pool, and the other that had pneumonia on top of her son that's injured, and the other killed. And I says, how do you stand all this? I mean, I'd be totally dippy. So so I could feel like I understood a little bit of what when people thought she was having problems. Believe me, she had them. Well, she's telling me this story about her life, and I was feeling really bad for her, and I thought, oh my God, you poor girl, I understand why you are the way you are. And about that time she says, oh, I've got a cop behind me. There's a red light on me. I turned around, and sure enough, it was a red light. We'd just gone through Fillmore, and we were just up past Fillmore. And that's all she said, and I turned around, and I thought she's going to pull over, and she kept going. And I says, Margaret, you better pull over. And she didn't even answer me, but when she glanced over at me, it was like her eyes were staring clear out in space. She got a spaced out look. I remember that, because I said, Margaret, and she just went right on. And so then I turned around and looked this way again, because I didn't want to be staring at the cop in back. Of course, I was looking through the little camper, and I don't know if he could see me, but I could see that red light, and then I could hear a siren. Well, I turned around and was looking straight ahead, and here's an exit, and I thought, well, maybe she's trying to get past this so that there's any traffic that she don't want to be right here where the exit turns off, so she's going to go beyond it and pull over. So I turn around, and I'm trying to say, trying to motion to them, the police, that she's going to pull over up here when we get past this exit, because believe me, that's what I thought she was going to do. And she just went on, and she went on, and I says, Margaret, if you don't stop, you're in trouble. And she looked at me, and she says, I haven't got time. We're already late. And she says, and I says, Margaret, you can tell the cop that you've got a son that's got to be to a doctor's appointment. Explain to him that you were late getting started. You're going to miss your appointment, and he'll understand that. And she says, no, he won't. I'll get a ticket. Where's the line? Where's the line? I says, what line? Well, there's a line up here. If I can just get past that line. I says, what are you talking about? Well, the county line. I says, are you nuts? I says, hey, that cop will follow you clear through Utah. She says, no, he won't. If I can get up to the line, I guess she figured he'd turn around when he got out of his county and just say, well, forget this, Oh, Lordy. By then, and here And then he really put the blaster on about, but he must have followed us a mile or so, or 2 or 3. I don't know. I know I was totally shocked. Well, here's cars going by, and about that time, there's a big old camper, a motorhome with a pickup or something pulling. It was a big long thing, and that poor old guy thought they were after him, and he starts pulling off the highway, and Margaret pulls out around him and goes on, and here comes the cop right behind her. And he pulls her over, and she pulled back in, and then he was really, I could tell he was really getting huffy. And I says, Margaret, pull over right now. And she says, I'm not going to. And I says, you are in bad trouble. I says, you are making him very angry. And she says, and he is making me angry. And she still would not stop. So anyway, oh, Lordy, I am at that time about fit to be tied, and I thought, is this for real? Really? Is this for real? And so the cop pulled out from his following us, and he pulled over into the next lane and passed us, and he's shaking his fist, and he's motioning for her park. And she just went on. And so he pulled in front of her so that she couldn't pass him. I mean, he just pulled in front because she would not pull over. So he got in front of her, and so she pulls in the passing lane and went to pass him. And so he pulled back in that lane so she couldn't pass. So she pulls in the next lane and was going to pass him. So he got right on the line and went right straight in between the 2 lanes. And so she couldn't get in either lane. And then he put on his brakes to slow her down, and she damn near went in the back of him. And she had to stop. She either had to stop or hit him. And so what does she do? She pulls off to the road and left her car half in the passing lane and half on the side. And he comes over and he says, oh, it's you again. And I thought, what? And he says, when I stopped you a month or so ago, I felt sorry for you, lady, that you have had it. And oh, Lordy. And he says, could I see your driver's license? And she opens her purse and thumbs around in it, and she says, I don't have one. I lost it last week. And so he says, well, where's could I see the registration on your car? And she says, I don't have one. And so he said, lady, I followed you for quite a ways back. She was going between 65 and 70 most of the time. And he says, I've been following you for quite a ways, and you were speeding. And he says, and then you refused to pull over and he says, you have got that offense, you have no license, no registration, you failed to listen to adhere to a command of a cop, whatever, and you were speeding. He says, would you step outside here, please? And she stepped out, and by then 2 other cops, he had called them in while she wouldn't stop. So they were right behind him. So there's 3 cop cars. Lord, I felt like, what in the hell? This is some kind of a nightmare. So anyway, here we are, and they slapped the handcuffs on her. Here's your 3 little kids in the truck in the back, and here's the retarded Mike in the front. Can't say a word. And then here's Ding-a-ling me sitting to the side wondering if this is real. And the cop looked at me and he said, did you know that I was in back of you? And I says, I didn't know till she told me. I says, I really thought she was going to pull over. And I says, by then the one cop had taken her over and stuck her in the police car. And the other 2 are standing there scratching their head, wondering what's going on. And I just stood there hoping no police car, don't anybody pass that knows me. So then I went back to the cop, and the 2 that's standing there looking stupid. And I said, would you guys mind if I pulled this car off the road? I don't want to get hit. And they says, oh, well, go ahead and pull it off. So here we are in between the 2 freeways because she didn't park over where she should have been pulled off by a cop. And so here we are, there, oh, Lord. And so she's sitting in the cop's car, and I went over to the cops, and I said, well, I think what I need to do, I says, I tried to tell her, that should probably understand that she's late for an appointment in Salt Lake. And I said, and she said to him when he says, why didn't you stop? She says, I don't have time. And he says, well, you got time now because you're going to jail. And she didn't care. Didn't matter to her. She says, Jenny, you take him on to Salt Lake. You get Mike up to Salt Lake. And I sat there wondering what I was hearing. And I got out and I said to the cops, I'll turn around and take the kids back home. But I need to cancel appointment in Salt Lake. And they says, a guy says she was going to a doctor in Salt Lake. And they says, what kind of a doctor? And I thought, oh, here we go. And so I says, what? And he says, what kind of a doctor? And I says, well, you're not going to believe it. I says, and I'm going to be truthful about it. It's a healer. And I says, and she's been to him before, and her boy that had been in a coma for 3 months and had been all crippled up, I says, when she went to him before, there was about 6 weeks, and that kid was riding a 3-wheel bicycle. I says, so he got help. And I can't explain it any more than that. And that's where she's going. But anyway. And so I thought, well, that was okay. So we went, the one cop was getting ready to take off with Margaret. And I said, let me go talk to her a minute. And so I went over and I says, Margaret, what did you have in mind for me to do with these 3 kids? If you had, she said, go ahead or you just go on to Salt Lake. She says, but I want to go too, so if I sign some papers, then I can probably get right out now and we'll just go on. And I says, you ain't going anywhere. Anyway, and she says, well, I've got an aunt that lives down in Fillmore, and that's where they were taking her to jail. And she says, so you get in touch with Gladys Robinson. And she can take the 3 kids and you can go on and take Mike to Salt Lake. She never gave me any money. She never said where he was going to stay. But, and not getting back to when I said, well, what about where you're staying, or what about the clothes for your kids? I says, Margaret, you're going to be gone till Friday. She never had a change of clothes for Mike. She never had any clothes for her because I talked to her, to Gladys that night. She never, and the only thing that she had for the 5 of them was in a grocery bag. Well, in the meantime, the kids had sat back there and took a Coke or Pepsi bottle and sat there dinging it on something, and I mean, it was jagged they broke it all to pieces, and it was all over that mattress that they were laying on, broken. And the little kid, when I went back to tell him, well, the cop said for you to explain to the kids what they're going to do with their mother so they won't be wondering what's going on. I went back and said, hey kids, your mother would not listen to the cop and she got in trouble. She's going to jail. And I'm going to take you back home. And they never even reacted. They never acted like they wanted to cry, nothing. And they says, we need to go to the bathroom. And so I said, what is all this glass? Well, they had glass broken all over. Well, I got a little cut right here in the end. I got, and I said, oh my Lord, and they never even picked up the glass. They were laying in it. And oh shit, I'll tell you. And we agreed that I was going to take the kids back home. So the cop took off with Margaret, and the other 2 were standing there and talking back and forth. And so, okay, it's okay that I go back. But I says, I've got a niece over in Meadow. I'll stop at her house. I will make a phone call from there and cancel the appointment in Salt Lake, and then I'll just go on home. Well, in the meantime, I thought, well, here's these kids. I says, can you wait till I get down the road here a little ways to my nieces? Well, we kept going and going and going, and we come back to Fillmore, and I thought, oh my heck, this is too far for those little kids. So I thought, I can't go to the bathroom. If we don't buy gas, you can't use the restrooms. So I went and got some gas, stopped, and I pulled into the service station. And I thought, oh my God, what am I doing here? I didn't know if it took regular or ethyl. And he says, what kind of gas? I don't know. I think regular. And Mike jumps out and comes staggering around the car, and he's trying to tell him, because he can't talk, well, it's ethyl, And so unleaded. So he starts to get the gas in, and there was a lock on the cap. Well, where's the key? And I says, oh my God, I think it's with the mother, and they just took her to jail. had 2 sets of keys, and it didn't dawn on me because I'd never have had a lock to realize it was on my key that I had. So he comes and looks in, and he says, well, here it is right here. And then I felt like a total idiot. And so, and here's another outfit that pulled in to gas up, and that wasn't the same one that passed us. I don't think. Maybe that's why they were looking at me so funny. The ones that thought the cop was after them that went, oh, Lordy, please no. Because they looked at me and they stood there and I says, it's unreal. Whatever. They were listening to the whole thing. Then the cousin, the aunt, or the Robinson lady's son, pulled up right in back of where we were parked. And these kids are saying, well, hi, whoever you are, whatever his name was. And so I presumed the cops had contacted him and said, go find the kids or whatever. And I says, oh, did the cops get a hold of you? And he says, what? And I says, your mother's down in jail. And here's this guy at the service station standing there like, what's going on here? I didn't even know the kids' names. I mean, it looked really good. I mean, here's me with not even knowing what kind of gas in the car. I didn't even know what I was driving. With kids I didn't even know. And I thought, how do you explain this? Well, so I told the cousin, well, Margaret got in trouble, and she's down at the jail. And he says, well, why don't you pull on down here? It's my mother's house is right down here on Main Street. Just go down 3 blocks and stop and whatever. And I says, I got to make some phone calls. And he will go on down there. And so I thought, heck no, I'll just go on down to stop at the Meadow. So I started out, I'd gassed up there, and the little kids jumped out and went to the bathroom, and their hair had not been combed. I didn't realize all this. I mean, you know, I just got in and was anxious to get going and get this thing over with. No hair combed, and the little girl had her shoes on the wrong feet, and they were laced all ski-wampus and crazy, and I was embarrassed. I mean, I was embarrassed. Well, and not only that, they weren't cleaned up. I mean, they looked like totally little orphans, and I'm sorry to say that, but you know the situation better than me, I realize. Well, so then I get down and I'm on the way to, by the way, the back in that stupid little outfit wouldn't lock or nothing, and the kids kept sitting back at the back, so I put my suitcase up front. Please sit up here, look out the window, the front window. Because they kept sitting at the back, and there was not a lock, and that other thing, the top window thing, kept flapping. And so anyway, they sat up front, and I'm going down the road, and I finally got off Meadow, and couldn't remember where my niece lived, and so I went up the road a ways where I thought she said, and I had some church, and turn this way, and whatever. And I thought, well, this isn't up this way, so I went to turn around and didn't know how to get it in reverse. So Mike's trying to tell me, push, you know. Well, I didn't know that he had to push down on it to get it to go in reverse, so I finally got it turned around, and he's kind of giggling, and so I stopped at 2 or 3 houses and asked where Tanya Labram lived. Well, she lives right up here, and then you turn and go up there and whatever, and I looked, and I got turned around, started out the road, and here's a cop light on me. So I thought, okay, that cop's after me. He's after me because of Margaret. But how did he know where I was at? I mean, he knew what I was driving, but they weren't following me. But I did tell. Well, no, but I had mentioned that I was going to stop down in Meadow at my niece's. Well, so here he comes, come right behind me, found me, you know, but he didn't know what street. I was wandering around trying to find, but here he was, came and put the light on me, and I pulled over, and I thought, my God, and it was only around the corner from my niece, and I thought, I'm sure glad he never pulled me over in front of her. She'd wonder what in the heck was going on. So he says, you need to come back up to Fillmore. They need you up at the jail. They want you to come back. And I says, what for? And he says, well, they just said to have you come back up. And he wouldn't tell me why or nothing, and I thought, well, maybe I've got to be a witness to something. I didn't know. So he says, well, I got a gas up at the station over here. He says, So, and he says, do you know where the jailhouse is? And I says, no, I don't. And he says, well, then you can follow me, but I got to gas up. And I says, and I got to go make a phone call at my niece's house. So you go on up to the station, the Husky, I think it was, where he told me. And I says, and I'll go in and make my phone calls, and you wait up there for me, and then I'll follow you back to Fillmore. Okay, it was all cut and dried. So I pull up to Tanya's, stopped, and he went on up to the turn, which is, well, her house is on the corner. He just turned the corner, stopped, and was waiting for me as I knocked on her door, and she came to the door, and I says, and I looked up, and here's the cop waiting for me. So I says, oh my God. She looks at me, and I says, this is a crazy story, but whatever. Anyway, I've got some kids here that I'm taking back to St. George because their mother got thrown in jail, and I was going to use your phone to make a long-distance call up in Salt Lake. But the cop's waiting for me, so I guess I'll make the call later. I'll tell you all about it. And I'm on my way to St. George, and she says, well, I'm going down tomorrow. And I says, well, do you want to go with us now? We're headed south. And she says, no, I need my car. And off I went. And she's standing there looking stupid and wondering, what is all this about? And I'm there because the cop's waiting for me, so I didn't have time to make my calls or talk or tell her what's really going on. So, okay, so I go and follow him, waited for him to gas up, and gathered up the glass out of the truck. I mean, put it in a dish, and so that the kids would quit wallowing in this glass. And we got back up to Fillmore, and then this big older man came out, and he said, we have a problem. Thought, yeah, you do. And he says, well, in the meantime, they'd got a hold of Gladys Robinson, which is Vic's sister. So he came down, she was down there at the police station, and she had told them the situation and said that Vic is under medication like Margaret is, and I didn't know Margaret was on a lot of medication. And because the cop, when he said she's got to have psychiatric help, that's all. I mean, that's all there is to it. I mean, she was totally. I could not reason with her. Nobody could reason with her. And so anyway, we stood there talking a minute, and then he says, well, the cop, the older man, he said, what we'll do is have the aunt here take the kids back to her house. She's offered to do that. And we're going to have to impound the truck because you can't take the kids home because we don't know if the husband is capable of taking care of them. And so they had the problem there. And he says, I guess that you'll have to catch a bus home. And I says, there's no sweat there because my niece is going to St. George tomorrow, so I'll ride home with her. If I can get over there, but I'll call her and she can, he says, well, we can run you over to Meadow. And I says, well, let me give her a call, and maybe she can just come pick me up. So, okay, so I made the phone call, and Tanya says, I says, I'm over at the police station, and I'll explain all about it. Can you pick me up? And she says, yes, I'll be right over. Well, so I got the suitcase, and they were going to put my suitcase in the aunt's car and took these kids back thinking it was theirs. And I says, you won't believe this. They don't have a suitcase. I says, would you believe? And I told the cops when we standing there up the streetway, up the line when this all happened, I says, hey, when I get home, I'm going to write the story. I may send you a copy. Anyway, and so what happened? I go out and I'm waiting for Tanya to come and get me, and she didn't show up right then. And the cops, he says, well, now do you want me to take you? Huh? And I said, no, she'll be here in a few minutes. I've got somebody here to pick me up. It's okay. So he went back in the building, and it was hotter than heck, and there was these big old humongous grasshoppers all over, and I looked at the cop as he was walking away, and I says, my word, these things are big enough to saddle, you know, and I thought I could have hopped, skipped, and jumped on one of them and rode them back to Meadow, but anyway, so I decided to walk because it was getting hot, and I thought, you know, I'll just need to walk anyway. So I started out, and I got probably a little over a mile before Tanya got there, and I was just about to where you go back onto the overpass to get on the freeway before she came, but she says, I looked at my gas tank, and I was almost empty, and I couldn't find my checkbook. And so that's why she said, here's people passing, looking at this here's this lady walking down in the heat of the day, carrying a suitcase and my purse. I mean, like, what in the hell? And I kept looking down when a car passed me, thinking, please don't anybody know me. I can't stand this. I tell you, it was wild. It was totally wild. So then
when she was staying in jail, they let her
yeah.
kids.
Yeah, they finally decided, after talking to Gladys, hey, this gal's got to have some help. So then they said to Margaret, well, you know, we'll release you and let you go up and stay at your aunt's tonight with the kids till we get figured out here what's going on. And she says, no, I'll stay here. I need the rest. And so she wouldn't leave the jail. She would not leave. So last night I called to ask Gladys, you know, about how the kids were, and she was, then's when she told me that, well, we found enough clothes.